So now we start with some very interesting thing. This is the first panel. On this panel, we have the pleasure to welcome several important people that carry the voice from governments, public administration, and the industry in different facets. I will then introduce them in alphabetical order. So I will start with Guillaume Avrin, who is actually the interministerial coordinator for the national strategy for AI in France, which is part of the France 2030 strategic plan for France for innovation and recovery, where you can find 4 billion euros, which are actually earmarked for strategic technology, including AI. And then we have Omar Mohsine, who is member of the Office of the United States Special Envoy, United Nations, Special Envoy on Technology. And actually, he also heads the open source team within the United Nations Office for Information and Communication Technology. He has worked in the United Nations with different capacities, different continents for over 15 years, leading projects like public-private partnership, innovation management, and designed all UN open source competitions for the Sustainable Development Goals, and developed the UN IT policy strategies. In his current position, Omar is leading the adoption and standardization of open source to ensure colleagues all over the world have the necessary tools to succeed in their respective mandate. Then we have Marc Palazon. Marc Palazon is the CEO of Smile, which is the largest European software company working on open source. And he's also president of the open source chapter of Numeum, which is the industry coalition of industries here in France that work in the IT sector. And that represent this a broad spectrum of digital actors in the digital transformation. And then we have Kate Stewart, who is the vice president of Dependable Embedded System at the Linux Foundation, where she has been there for over 8 years. She initiated important projects like the Zephyr project, has worked for enhancing the real-time capabilities, safety critical system in the Linux community, and has over 30 years in system software development, embedded software tooling in Linux and Unix. It also manages, since over 15 years, quality assurance teams, and co-founded SPDX, a software package data exchange, which is an industry standard, so ISO international standard for tracking open source software components. And actually, I'm here just as a moderator to ask you a question, nothing more. So the knowledge is within your heads. So first of all, thanks a lot for accepting to be with us today. I would propose to start with a round of questions around the table. And I will start with Marc, if you agree. So I agree. You agree? Fantastic. So my initial question for you is, as CEO of Smile, which is the largest company in open source in Europe, but actually in your position as head of the Numeum open source chapter, can you tell a little bit more from what you have seen? I heard that you also ran an open source study recently, how you have seen the role of open source as a driver for digital transformation and how it appears in all different sectors of industry, both in France at an international level?
Yes, in fact, I am involved in open source since now more than 20 years in France and now in Europe. And of course, I saw that there is a real improvement of the capability for administration and private sector to use open source for their strategical projects. And as you explained, Numeum is the main trade association for IT and digital in France. And of course, we try to represent all the IT activity in France. And personally, I am very involved in open source, so I follow the market. And last year, at the second half, we settled a quite important study in order to understand in France what is the use of open source for the private sector, but also for administration. And to do that, we used a methodology used by our counterpart in German market, which name is Bitkom. They use this methodology to make this study in open source since, I think, 2019, something like that. and it's recognized by the European community. And so in France, we copy and paste somewhere the methodology with more than 600 organizations in private sector and administration in order to have feedback. And we just provide the results at the end of the year 2023. So I can give you some tips if you want. It's quite amazing that we saw that around 66% of organization in private sector and in public sector are very sponsor on open source, are sponsor or very sponsor on open source. I think that 80% of all these organizations are actually using open source in their project, and it's 90% for administration. So it's quite huge in terms of use. And if I come back 20 years ago, it was really not the case. So we see really the improvement.
Thank you. Now, again, open source has been growing a lot over the past 20 years. You see, we have seen this is really becoming pervasive across all of society. But the point is that with the great power, great use, great diffusion comes great responsibility at some moment in time. So we have challenges in security, in dependability, in quality of software. And so can you tell us more about your experience in what is being done to actually increase the quality of these kind of products that are used over the place in open source, in particular for SPDX, and the role, of course, sorry, I'm pulling the blanket on my side, the role you see for Software Heritage and the Software Hash ID in helping into this direction.
Sure. So to give a bit of context here, the Linux kernel has been around for 33 years. Now think of that. Some of those initial versions, there are copies of it still out there and being used in code. And so being able to trace that and go back, has been an interesting, we've done various studies, but now that Software Heritage is there, a lot of this stuff is now sitting there. But with the last 6.6 release that just came out, there was over 20,594 contributors who've actually gotten code into that kernel. So it is a massive undertaking of sharing of information. It's actually running at like 9 commits an hour and 1 bug fix per hour. And being able to track what's coming out with releases, what's happening for various point releases, what's backports, is a tremendous undertaking. And so being able to be efficient about saying, this is exactly what I've brought into my code. We need infrastructure, we need to do this at scale. Because reproducibility is going to be key, especially as the CRA and the European registration is going to come up. We need to go back to the source of truth. And so the source of truth and having a publicly agreed upon source of truth is one of the key areas where I see Software Heritage playing a key role for this code, because that reproducibility is going to be key. Linux itself is used in, from supercomputers to stock exchanges, it's up in rockets, it's in cars, it's in medical devices, it's in airplanes. It surrounds us. And we need to be able to make these things dependable because, all of us are traveling on public transit systems, driving our cars, taking airplanes across oceans, things like that. We care about this. At the Linux Foundation, the Linux Foundation itself has been around for about 15 years. And there's over 900 projects in the Linux Foundation right now. And the Linux kernel is by far the biggest and the fastest moving, but there's a whole bunch of other ones. Things like Kubernetes, people, and the whole cloud infrastructure is being hosted there, as well as the OpenJS Foundation. And so we've got a wide range of source codes that are sitting there and being hosted in communities, quite frankly, as well as standards that are being evolved from there. SPDX itself evolved from the need to track what was happening when we were shipping out source code and shipping out products. We started the project in 2010 when myself and a couple of other people realized we were doing the same stupid work of grep on code bases over and over again, and we wanted to share the data. And so, we had to do this for complying with the licenses and adhering to the open source terms. And over a period of 10 plus years, we finally managed to turn it into an ISO standard. And so that happened in 2021. In 2022, the Software Heritage or Software Hash IDs now actually have made their way into SPDX. They're there today into the standard, and they'll be carrying forward. as a way of being able to index and refer to code when it's there. And quite frankly, refer to be able to, things that have been built and shipped. So I'm looking forward to seeing, how things are going to emerge and, what we're going to be able to do. The whole supply chain is built on various product lines, and software is at the heart of a large part of it. But we're seeing more and more things emerge like models, which are built of software, but they're trained. And then there's the data sets that are being training them. And so these types of concepts are going to be emerging more and more into our supply chains and being able to be ready to track back to the source of truth for them. Similarly, hardware. Hardware is built of Verilog files. That's something that possibly needs to be kept and preserved, because how hardware and software interact is a source of vulnerabilities. These are all pieces in our supply chain right now. If you want to think of an example to keep it in your head, think of a self-driving car. You're basically there, what you're doing is you've got your hardware, you've got your sensors, you've got sensors bringing in mirrors and images, you've got your data coming in from that side, you've got autonomous learning happening now from data sets, you've got services being pulled. All of these are areas where things could go wrong, and we want to make sure that people are safe and things stay dependable. And so being able to extend our ways of tracking this information is one of the things we're looking at in the SPDX project, and hoping to partner to a certain extent with the NREA folk as the data as sources of truth for building things on top of. Certainly with the CRA coming into play, and being able to, things have to be maintained for certain periods of time based on the latest estimates. People are going to be needing to do this more and more, whether they share it publicly or not, it's still going to need to be tracked. So making this easy to work at scale is one of the things I think we've got to really focus on in the years to come.
Thanks a lot, Kate and Mark. I mean, from this initial part, we see the point of view from industry. I mean, it's interesting to see how open source is actually spreading across all the line, how the new challenges are coming, I mean, to ensure quality, traceability, security, according to regulations. Now, I would like to turn to the part of the roundtable that come from governments and intergovernmental organizations. So, Omar, in your special position, you are both in the Office of the Digital Envoy and also in charge of the open source strategy internal to the United Nations. Can you give your point of view on how open source is seen as an opportunity, how can it contribute to the sustainable development goals that have been put forward? And of course, and I'm pulling your leg a little bit, how do you see the effort you have seen today, I mean, building this archive, play a role in that scenario?
Thank you very much, Roberto. Hi, everyone. We're the first team ever built at the UN in terms of open source. And I think, and I'm very proud, like just the existence of the team makes sure that is a testimony that we now care about open source, and open source is really becoming more and more at the heart of what we do. Now, we look at open source from 2 points of views. First, we are big public administration, and like all the ministries around, we want to be more efficient, we want to be more creative and more innovative. So here we're looking at injecting open source in our work, but also we look at the open source from the other part of it is the main mean of implementation of SDGs. Like we will not deliver on the sustainable development goals. Our member state, the day they approve the sustainable development goals, they identify that technology is one of the main mean of implementations. For us, is beyond technology is really open source. Why? Open source is democratic. It's free. It's available to anyone. It's not small group of people or small group of countries. It's really in the hands of everybody. And my personal open source story was a fascinating one where we did together with the European Commission, we did a competition called Open Source Software for SDGs. And we said, hey, world, please come help us. We picked an SDG, education, and we said, these are clear 2 challenges that we want you to come and tell us how you could fix them. And these were based on Moodle, on the open source platform Moodle. And we had a lot of submissions from everywhere in the world. We had a jury who carefully looked at every submission. And the winner was from Côte d'Ivoire. He was inspector in Ministry of Education, who they faced during COVID a problem. The Moodle couldn't build the virtual rooms that they needed. He built a whole module And that module allowed the ministry to be able to perform and teach the kids virtually throughout the COVID. And that for us was a complete eye-opening thing. Like it's incredible what's happening everywhere in the world. That is not just the usual developed world. A lot of things are happening. So that was one of this for us was powerful. So now how we're doing this. So first, in terms of how we are making open source internally relevant for our work is we developed a strategy. We call it the UN open source strategy that is built on 3 pillars. The first pillar is policy. We need to build the rules of the game. What is it that we want to open source? What is it that we don't want to open source? If we want to open source, where should we open source it? Which license should we open source it? Does it need to be checked and check the security? So these are the boring part, but foundational part. Like without that, you can do. The second pillar of our strategy is based on what we call culture change. So now if you stop 10,000 people in the IT shop at the UN and then ask them what they think of open source, probably you're going to have 10% who will hate it. And then you'll have maybe 10, 15 who will love it. And there's 70, 80% in between who have no idea. So what we're trying to do now is like at least make 20, 30% people love it. So no more. If we do that, it will already be a huge win for me. So we tell the story. So here we do every 3 months, every quarter, we do a day of trainings where we have a lot of speakers. And here we have Rochester Institute, who also did one session for us, where we show them success stories, what others are doing with open source. And the first time we launched that, we sent an email to everybody at the UN, and we hope to have 50, 60 applications. We get 700. That alone was a testimony that people wanted to know about open source. So that is something we're doing. We're trying to identify what we call our open source heroes, a bit like your ambassador in the. So we want to have this group of heroes to connect with each other and then be able to share lessons learned and so on. And then now we're working on that policy part. It is boring, it is painful, but it is foundational. So second part, why also we care about open source is that throughout the years, we have built, like all your ministries, all your organizations, hundreds and maybe thousands of software, because we run our operations. We are the UN, we have a big blue helmet, we're the second deployed army, we have refugee, the humanitarian aspect, we have the statistics, we're a massive organizations, and that for each of these parts, we build software that now we're trying to identify and open up. There is no reason for us to keep this closed. We didn't open it just because there was no policies and people didn't know how, but we want to open that so others can help us first improve that software. And then second, others to be able to use it. And it's really very important for us. Now I want to talk about the part that is about the outside, the open source for the SDGs, and here we're trying to do many things. So the first, last June, we organized the first conference called OSPOS for Good, where we're trying to bring the main open source ecosystem. It was a big success. We had a group of dedicated 80 participants that were from 8 to 9 countries. And it was so good, like people liked it. We'd send a survey and everybody really very happy to be able to connect and meet and interact with each other, that we decided to make it a yearly one. And the next one will be on July 9th and 10th. The conference, it takes place in New York at the UN headquarters. Please reach out. There will be a website, I think, either today or tomorrow that will be up about the conference. It's called OSPOS for Good. And this time we decided to make it two days. And why do we organize that? Is that we realize there's a lot of regional conferences. Like I'm going to FOSDAM, where Europe is very Europe-centric, and then there's a lot of North America things. But this is to my knowledge, the only one that is global. We really want to hear, and again, my example of the Côte d'Ivoire inspector in the ministry, we want to hear the perspective from around the world. So we want it to be the first, the biggest UN conference on open source. Here we want to build partnerships with all of you because, again, as I mentioned, we have all this software that we want to start opening up, but we don't open it for open up. We want to open it up so others can take it and then help us improve it. So that's another part that we are working a lot on. And I think I'll stop it here. I'm happy to connect after that if you have any questions or anything. And thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot, Omar. It's pretty impressive to see the kind of work that the United Nations is starting to do around this. I don't know. Maybe I should. Why did you wait so much? I mean, this was something evident to do before. But anyway, it's very, very happy to see that this is moving on. Now, I would like to turn to you, Guillaume. We have heard also in the opening address this morning, here in France, our president in various occasions insisted on the importance of playing this open source strategy in different areas, and in particular on AI. Since you are the national coordinator for artificial intelligence, I think many people here in the room are very eager to know more about what is your view, why this is important, and what is your perspective about the future? I mean, why the French government is insisting on this, and what do you think we can get by taking this approach?
Thank you very much, Roberto. Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here with you today. So I think indeed the way we see the open source question opportunity within the national strategy for AI is this question of to use an economical term, the topic of market failure. There is a common goods that are needed if we want to be able to develop competitive products and services on AI. But in order to be able to develop and deploy these products and services, we need to have the infrastructures in order to be competitive. And these common goods, as we know, it's not working perfectly well if it's only funded by the private companies, because there is a there is a need for motivation. There is a need for the public to invest in these AI highways, let's say, that are going to be used by our private stakeholders that want to develop competitive product and services. And it's really about that, about building these highways for AI. So it's not just, I mean, there is a question of open source models, open source tools, but before that, I think we are thinking about the common goods such as talent. We have to be sure that we have the right education system, the right training programs in order to have the talents that are available in Europe and in France in order to be able to accelerate regarding the development and deployment of AI technologies. It's also about having the supercomputing facilities in order to train the most advanced AI systems. And just to provide you an example and a link with an open source question opportunity. So the French president announced in June 2023 the extension of a supercomputing facility that is called Janzé, that is in the Plateau de Saclay in France. And the access to this supercomputing facility is free if you share the result of the research you have done on these supercomputing facilities with the rest of the community. So it could be, for example, opening the model that you have developed using this, that you have trained using these supercomputing facilities and so on. So there is a link between these AI highways that we are building and the opportunity of sharing with the community the models and tools that we are developing, and that could be open source. So there is the supercomputing facilities. There is also the access to decarbonated energy in order to be able to train and to be competitive regarding the training of these most advanced AI systems. There is a question of software, and it's before speaking about the foundation model that could be or not open source, there is, of course, the libraries that are used by the community in order to develop these AI systems. And you know that we have been speaking about INRIA and the involvement of INRIA in software heritage. INRIA is also involved in the development of the scikit-learn library for let's say, classical machine learning. It's the third library that is most used in the world in AI. So it's very important to continue developing this kind of libraries in order to be able to share this tool with all the companies and general public in order to be able to largely deploy AI system in our society. So libraries, evaluation tools, when you are developing the metrics, the evaluation protocols, the test benchmark, and the testing benchmark, and so on, it does not make really sense to keep them for yourself, because if you want your metrics and your evaluation protocols and your testing tools to be, the result that you get from them to be accepted by everyone, then you need to have a consensus regarding the way you are measuring the performance, the robustness, the resiliency of AI systems. And so you have to build these metrics and evaluation protocols and evaluation tools with the community. There is on Hugging Face, the OpenLLM benchmark that is well known. You have different other initiatives that have been launched regarding the benchmarking and characterization of alternative AI system. But there is an opportunity to share evaluation tools also. And then there is, of course, the question of the models themselves. Somehow, I think we can consider foundation models. They can be seen as infrastructures that can be used by other stakeholders, other companies, to fine-tune them, to deploy them for specific application areas, and so on. So it makes also sense to develop open source foundation models that are going to be used by the rest of the community in order to develop competitive services and products. So within the National Strategy for AI, we are definitely supporting the development of this open source foundation models. And of course, and to be totally honest and transparent with you, if you do not have the money, at least you have the community, right? With open source, we know that it's very difficult. When we see what is happening in the world right now with generative AI, we are speaking about being able to gather €1 billion in order to be able to develop a competitive foundation models. It's something that is very difficult to be done in Europe and in France, and with our partners for example, from the Francophonie, from Canada, and from Africa. It's something that is very difficult to do. But if we manage to have this collaborative work around the development of AI system, libraries, evaluation tools, and so on, then we can be competitive, including with the state-of-the-art system that are developed in the US, for example, or in China at the moment. So it's also a very important point. I think this is for the development part, the infrastructure part of AI, but the title of the National Strategy for AI is, the main objective is disseminating AI in the economy. So it's about dissemination. And I think open source is also an amazing opportunity to disseminate AI. When you look at a company that is willing to automatize one specific production line, one specific recognition task in order to detect default on some PCs, there are two main ways to do it. Some companies will prefer to externalize this task automation by AI, relying on some companies that are providing consulting services in order to integrate technologies. But there is also, the opportunity to directly use VGG16, YOLO, Mask, RCNN tools that are available in everywhere in the open source world, and you can download them, fine-tune them, adapt them to your specific application area, your specific task, and get very, very good performances. I have seen that. There was a task about, I don't remember how you say amiante in English. To recognize the fibers. It's something that is very interesting for the laboratories that are doing that. And, they could just externalize the automatization of this part. But in fact, we have seen that just downloading the pattern recognition models that are available open source online and fine-tune them to recognize this kind of fiber is working amazingly well. And so if one laboratory is managing to integrate this open source technology in their laboratory, all the other laboratories are going to be willing to do the same, right? Because there is a competitive challenge associated with the automation of these tasks. And so open source is an excellent opportunity to access to this dissemination, large deployment of AI technologies. And it's what also we are trying to do within the National Strategy for AI.
Thanks a lot, Guillaume. This is pretty insightful. Now, if I may try to summarize what we are hearing here, I mean, you see from the public sector, international organization, intergovernmental organization, etc., there is this idea that we should use public money to build some kind of highways. Many years ago, it was the information highways. Now today it's AI highways or whatever, because you are building the key infrastructure that cannot be built just by people alone, and you want to build this infrastructure to free the energy and the power of other people. This can be done in France with the strategy you are leading, Guillaume, and we are personally, I'm extremely grateful to France for doing this. And actually, I don't know if people in the room know, but I mean, France has been marked many, many times over the year is the best place for doing open source in the world for many reasons. I mean, many years ago, 2005, it was Georgia Tech, so you cannot say we paid them. Okay, so it was actually done this way, and very happy to see France taking the lead again. I'm excited to hear from you, Omar, what the United Nations is starting to do, because again, open source is kind of an incredible tool for sharing knowledge with developing countries, across countries, etc. And so I want to go back to the industry side and ask Marc and Kate, what do you feel by hearing? I mean, public sector representatives saying something that you have been thinking for decades. Is it fine? This is paradise.
No, in fact, personally, I'm very happy to hear about the fact that now administration understood that open source is key, and not only not to be linked with Microsoft or other type of competitor, but just to build sustainable, performant, and innovative platform. And what I heard about IA, it's key because IA, it's a new domain, and open source is quite strong in France, especially. I can say also that in the survey we saw, if we compare with the German market, for example, that the open source market in France, it's quite high. And we can say that because of administration, because of some investment, because of our university, we have good developers, good companies, and the use of open source in France is quite huge. And the market in Europe, for example, the market of open source, the biggest market is in France, due to the fact that France invests in open source since more than 20 years, I can say. And it's a key asset for the country, I think, and for IA in particular.
I'll also say that I'm excited to hear that the OSPOs and the use of open source is being standardized in government and international agencies, in the sense that it's also going to mean that it's going to percolate into the legislation. And so people who actually understand working with open source and have people within their governments working with open source will hopefully make better laws so that they don't cause problems down the road.
Okay, so thanks a lot, everybody, for this. I'm so grateful for all of you for having accepted to take part of your precious time to come here and share your vision and to share with the people that is working together with us on this initiative around preserving, sharing, collecting, making available, studying, leveraging open source in this initiative around software heritage. Now, I think what we can do is to actually move to the next section, because you heard a lot about why all this is important. And let's see what in practice open source can do through a couple of very precise examples. So thanks a lot for being here. I think we can, for the participants.